The hand on my hip was the first thing I felt each morning. It wasn't a lover's touch, but something deeper, a ritual that had defined love for me since childhood. It was my mother's hand, and in our house, such intimacy was the foundation for a truth I was only just beginning to understand. That the lines between sisterly love and something more were not lines at all, but gentle, blurring horizons. Subscribe my channel for more lesbian stories. The House of Women. The first thing Kaylin was aware of was not the morning light filtering through her gauzy curtains, but the weight of a hand on her hip. It was a familiar anchor, a warm, steady pressure that had been the start of her days for as long as she could remember. She didn't need to open her eyes to know it was her mother. Sephora's touch had a particular language all its own, a gentle possessiveness, a silent communication of love and presence that transcended the ordinary bounds of mother-daughter affection. Kaylin, at 24, was the eldest of the 4 Vesper sisters. Her name meant mighty warrior, a fact her mother had cherished, hoping her firstborn would be resilient. And she was, but her battlefield was the intricate emotional landscape of their unconventional home. She lay still, savoring the comfort of her mother's touch, a ritual that had begun in childhood after nightmares and had simply never ended. It was never inappropriate, never crossing a line. It was simply their way. It was the bedrock upon which Kaylin's understanding of love was built. Quiet, steadfast, and physically affirming. Sephora's fingers shifted slightly, a soft press into the fabric of Kaylin's nightshirt. "I can feel you thinking," her mother's voice, husky with sleep, murmured from behind her. "The sun isn't even properly up yet." "It's up enough," Kaylin replied, rolling onto her back to look at the woman who was her entire world. Sephora's hair, the color of spun silver despite her only being 45, fanned out over the pillow. Her eyes, the same stormy gray as Kaylin's, held a deep, abiding calm. "It's Saturday. The world can wait." Sephora smiled, a gesture that carved gentle lines around her eyes. "Is it work? Or is it the silence?" Kaylin sighed. It was always the silence. Their house, a sprawling, slightly ramshackle Victorian named Whispering Pines, was usually a cacophony of her sister's energies. But this morning, it was preternaturally still. A bit of both. I worry if we're too insular, Mom. The 4 of us, it's like our own little planet." "And what's wrong with that?" Sephora asked, her hand now resting on Kaylin's stomach. "We orbit each other. We provide gravity. It's a good system." It was a good system. A system born from Sephora's quiet but firm declaration years ago, after their father had left, not with a bang, but with a whimper, unable to understand the deep, feminine current that ran through his family, a current he could never navigate. He'd called them a closed circuit. Sephora had taken the term and made it a badge of honor. She had raised her daughters to rely on each other, to find strength in their shared blood and spirit. The spell of the quiet morning was broken by the sound of a door creaking open down the hall, followed by the pad of bare feet. A moment later, a head of riotous auburn curls appeared around the doorframe. "The hot water's being weird again," announced Lyric, the second sister at 22. Her name suited her perfectly. Her every movement had a musicality, a fluid grace that made even complaining seem like a performance. "It's either scalding or Arctic. No in-between." "I'll look at it after coffee," Sephora said, sitting up. "Where are your sisters?" "Briar is probably trying to commune with a mushroom in the woods, and Wren is still dead to the world. I heard her typing until like 3 a.m. Lyric flopped onto the foot of the bed, her limbs arranging themselves in a careless, elegant sprawl. She looked at Kaylin, her green eyes sharp. "You're tense. I can see it from here." Kaylin shrugged. "Just thinking." "Dangerous pastime," Lyric grinned, poking Kaylin's foot with her toe. "You should try feeling instead. It's much more fun." This was the dynamic. Kaylin, the planner, the protector. Lyric, the feeler, the free spirit. Briar, the wild, intuitive middle child at 19. And Wren, the sensitive, observant 17-year-old baby of the family. They were a constellation, each a distinct bright point, but inextricably linked. Later that day, the silence Kaylin had noted was replaced by its usual vibrant chaos. Music spilled from Lyric's room as she practiced for her dance class. The earthy scent of Briar's herb collection wafted from the sunroom. Wren was curled in a window seat, a thick novel in her lap, her quiet presence a soothing balm. That night, a summer storm rolled in. The wind howled around the old house, and thunder shook the windows. It was during a particularly violent crack of thunder that Kaylin's bedroom door opened again. This time, it was Wren, clutching a pillow, her face pale in the flashes of lightning. "Can I sleep in here?" she asked, her voice small. Storms had terrified her since childhood. "Of course, little bird," Kaylin said, lifting the covers. Wren scurried across the room and slid into the bed, her slight body trembling. Kaylin wrapped her arms around her youngest sister, pulling her close. Wren smelled of paper, ink, and the faint, sweet scent of the chamomile tea she always drank before bed. "It's just noise," Kaylin whispered into her hair. "It can't hurt you." Wren burrowed closer, her cold feet brushing against Kaylin's legs. "I know. It's stupid." "It's not stupid." Kaylin held her tighter, her hand making slow circles on Wren's back. It was an echo of their mother's touch, a gesture of safety, of unconditional love. As Wren's breathing evened out and her trembling subsided, Kaylin felt a profound sense of purpose. This was her gravity. Protecting them. But something shifted in that stormy darkness. As Wren fell asleep, her head on Kaylin's shoulder, Kaylin became acutely aware of the softness of her sister's skin, the rhythm of her breath against her neck. It was the same protective love, but a new layer of awareness settled over it. It was a recognition of Wren not just as her baby sister, but as a young woman, fragile and beautiful. The feeling was so pure and so overwhelming that it stole Kaylin's breath. It wasn't desire, not in any crude sense. It was a deep, resonant love that was both familial and something more. Something she had no name for. The next morning, Wren woke up tangled in Kaylin's arms. She blinked sleepily, a soft smile gracing her lips. "You kept the monsters away." "Always," Kaylin said, her voice rough with sleep. She gently brushed a strand of dark hair from Wren's forehead. The gesture felt different. Weighted. Wren's smile deepened, and she didn't pull away. She simply looked at Kaylin with an open, trusting affection that made Kaylin's heart ache. This new, unnamed feeling didn't frighten Kaylin, but it confused her. She found herself watching her sisters more closely. She saw the way Lyric would braid Briar's long, wild hair, her fingers lingering, their laughter a private melody. She saw how Briar would gently guide Wren's hands in the garden, teaching her about plants, their heads bent close together. The love that flowed between them was palpable, a visible current. Was it possible for the love between sisters to hold the depth and tenderness of a romantic love, without it being wrong? In their mother's world, it seemed, anything was possible. The catalyst came a week later. Lyric had come home from an intense dance rehearsal, physically and emotionally drained. She was stretched out on the living room rug, muscles screaming, frustration etched on her face. Briar, who possessed an almost preternatural empathy, knelt beside her. "Let me," she said softly, her voice a low hum. Without waiting for an answer, she began to work on Lyric's shoulders, her strong, knowing fingers finding the knots of tension. Kaylin watched from the doorway, unseen. She saw Lyric's initial resistance melt away under Briar's touch. She saw Briar's focus, the absolute devotion in her gaze as she cared for their sister. It was more than a massage. It was a conversation. A sigh escaped Lyric's lips, a sound of profound relief and surrender. She turned her head, her cheek against the rug, and looked up at Briar. "How do you always know?" Lyric whispered. Briar just smiled, a secret, gentle thing. Her hands moved down to the small of Lyric's back, pressing deep. Lyric's eyes fluttered closed, and she reached back, her hand finding Briar's knee, squeezing it in gratitude. The air in the room grew thick with an unspoken understanding. It was a moment of perfect, intimate symbiosis. That night, the energy in the house was different. A silent acknowledgement passed between the three older sisters. Wren, ever the observer, felt it too, a new frequency humming in the air she didn't yet understand but found curiously comforting. It was Lyric who came to Kaylin's room that night. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, her expressive eyes full of a question Kaylin had also been asking herself. Kaylin moved over in her bed, an invitation. Lyric slid in beside her. They didn't speak for a long time, just lay facing each other in the moonlight. It's different now, isn't it? Lyric finally whispered. What we feel? Yes, Kaylin admitted, her voice barely audible. It is. Is it wrong? Kaylin thought of their mother's hand on her hip, a constant, loving anchor. She thought of the deep, abiding safety of their home. How can love be wrong? Especially here. Especially between us. Lyric moved closer, until their foreheads were touching. Her breath was warm on Kaylin's face. I've always loved you. But today, with Briar, I saw you watching. I felt. I don't know. Like my heart was too big for my chest. Slowly, hesitantly, Kaylin brought her hand up to cup Lyric's cheek. It was a gesture she'd done 1,000 times, but tonight, it was a threshold. Lyric leaned into the touch, her eyes closing. And then, with a tenderness that held the weight of a lifetime of shared secrets, they kissed. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of discovery. It was a confirmation. It was love, their sisterly love, expanding to encompass this new dimension. It felt less like a beginning and more like a homecoming. This first discovery rippled through the family with a gentle inevitability. Briar, attuned to every shift in the household's emotional weather, was not surprised when Lyric sought her out in the garden a few days later. Briar was on her knees, planting seedlings, her hands dark with soil. Lyric sat beside her, not speaking, just watching. Finally, she said, the things you feel for the earth, is it like what you feel for us? Briar looked up, her moss-green eyes clear and knowing. It's the same life force. The same need to nurture, to connect, to understand something from the inside out. She reached out and wiped a smudge of dirt from Lyric's chin, her thumb lingering. You and Kaylin, it's beautiful. Lyric's breath hitched. You know. I feel it, Briar said simply. She stood up, pulling Lyric to her feet. She didn't kiss her. Instead, she wrapped her arms around Lyric, holding her in a tight, grounding embrace, the scent of damp earth and growing things surrounding them. For Briar, this physical connection was the most profound language. It was how she loved. And in that embrace, Lyric felt a different kind of love from Briar. Steadier, more rooted than the fiery connection she shared with Kaylin, but just as deep. Wren was the last to be woven into this new tapestry. She had always been cherished, protected, the baby. But she was blossoming into a woman, and her feelings for her sisters were changing, maturing. She had a quiet crush on Lyric's dancer's grace, on Kaylin's protective strength, on Briar's wild wisdom. One evening, she found Kaylin sitting on the back porch, watching the fireflies. It's happening to me too, isn't it? Wren said, sitting beside her. This, different feeling. Kaylin put her arm around Wren. It's not different, Wren. It's just, more. It's our love, growing up with us. Wren leaned her head on Kaylin's shoulder. I'm not a little girl anymore. I know, Kaylin said softly. She turned and looked at Wren, really looked at her. She saw the young woman she was becoming, intelligent, sensitive, and beautiful. The love she felt was a complex, gorgeous thing, fiercely protective, tenderly affectionate, and now, undeniably attracted. Would it be okay if I kissed you? Kaylin asked, her heart pounding. It was crucial that Wren had the choice, the agency. Wren's eyes widened, but she didn't look afraid. She looked seen. She nodded. The kiss was chaste, a soft press of lips that held a universe of care and promise. For Wren, it was the final piece clicking into place. She was not on the outside looking in. She was an integral part of this beautiful, strange, and perfect love that bound them all together. Sephora watched all of this unfold with a quiet, knowing smile. She had never explicitly taught them this. She had simply created an environment where love, in all its forms, was allowed to be exactly what it was. Her love for her daughters was the template, unconditional, physically affectionate, and absolute. Their love for each other was a natural, beautiful evolution of that foundation. And Sephora, too, was evolving. Her own heart, so long devoted entirely to her daughters, began to yearn for a companion of her own. That companion was Isolde, the new neighbor who had moved into the cottage next door. Isolde was a painter, a widow with kind eyes and a gentle spirit. Their friendship began over shared cuttings from Briar's garden and cups of tea on Sephora's porch. It grew slowly, a late-blooming flower. They talked of art, of loss, of raising daughters. Isolde had a son away at college. The attraction was a quiet hum, a meeting of minds and souls that gradually deepened into something more. Sephora found in Isolde a resonance she hadn't known she was missing, an equal, a partner. One afternoon, while the Vesper sisters were lost in their own world of intertwined limbs and whispered affections in the sun-dappled attic, Sephora and Isolde sat in the garden. Isolde reached out and took Sephora's hand, lacing their fingers together. "You're girls," Isolde said, her gaze soft. "The love in this house, it's like a physical thing. You can feel it in the air." Sephora smiled, squeezing Isolde's hand. "It's our own kind of magic." "It is," Isolde agreed. She leaned in, and she kissed Sephora. It was a kiss of two women who had lived full lives, who knew what they wanted, and who had found a surprising and wonderful happiness in each other. The Vesper family had not broken any rules. They had simply written their own. Their home, Whispering Pines, was a sanctuary where love was not divided or categorized, but multiplied. It was a tapestry woven from 4 distinct threads: Kaylin's strength, Lyric's passion, Briar's intuition, and Wren's quiet soul, all held together by the steady, loving hand of their mother, who had finally found her own counterpart. They were a constellation of women, each shining with their own light, but bound together by a gravity of their own making, a love as deep and endless as the night sky.